The Charlotte Ledger Podcast is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network.
Hey, it's Tony Messia with the Charlotte Ledger, and you're listening to the Charlotte Ledger Podcast. You can find out more about the Charlotte Ledger and our commitment to delivering smart local information through newsletters and this podcast at thecharlotteledger.com. Today's podcast is a recording of a great conversation I had with a panel of experts on Charlotte's retail and hospitality industry, looking at some trends that might not be that obvious. But first, I wanted to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Coca-Cola Consolidated, Charlotte's local bottler and the largest Coca-Cola bottler in the U.S. Coke Consolidated recently invested $15 million into its Monroe facility, which included a new technical training academy, the first of its kind within the Coca-Cola system. Learn more at www.cokeconsolidated.com/media. Today's podcast is a discussion I had about a new report called the Charlotte Hospitality and Retail Guide 2025, which was put together by several companies that work in that industry. We talked about the growth of Charlotte's urban core, like South End, but also the retail growth underway in more suburban areas like Ballantyne and SouthPark and Huntersville. We discussed what retailers and restaurants need to do to be successful and to stand out from the competition, and we talked about the split between large retailers and the trend toward smaller retail spaces. The discussion is with three people from the companies that put out the report. Daniel Gibson of Nice Day, which is a marketing agency that specializes in retail, hospitality, and real estate. Adam Williams of Rebel, which is an urban retail advisory firm that provides full-service brokerage and consulting services. And Brian Southwick of Southwick Architecture Plus Interiors, which is a hospitality-focused architecture and interior design firm. All right, let's get to it. We're here today to talk about the Charlotte Hospitality and Retail Guide 2025. It's a 30-page study by Nice Day, Southwick Architecture Plus Interiors, and Rebel. And it's looking at trends in retail in Charlotte. And the thing I really like about it is that, when you think about, the hospitality industry and everything that's going on in Charlotte, a lot of times you kind of see it as like a one-off thing. Maybe you're scrolling through Instagram and you see some cool feature, some new retail concept, or, you read about it somewhere. But the thing I like about this report is that it talks about the trends and it sort of pulls all those threads together. It's not just kind of a one-off thing. It's like what's going on in Charlotte as it relates to retail and hospitality, and you three certainly, know a lot about this industry, and looking forward to our conversation today. So, when you look at this report, it really identifies three main trends. The first one is the urban-suburban shift that's creating new possibilities beyond the city core. The second is what it says is a strategic split emerging between micro venues and larger entertainment destinations. And then the third is creative partnerships between operators and developers that are unlocking fresh approaches to growth. And we're going to talk about all three of those, but we'll break it down a little bit. But my first question to you, I guess, is, how is the hospitality industry in Charlotte doing these days?
Yeah, I'll take that on. I think it's definitely emerging and growing. There's been a lot of, longtime restaurateurs and that have been homegrown here in Charlotte, but I think there's a lot of out of market or kind of regional players that have come into market that are fighting for space here. So, I think, we're working with a lot of the different groups that have been established here for the long term, but, it's just more and more players are coming into the market. I'm sure, Adam, you see that with, on your end, kind of entering the deals. Yeah, I would actually double down on what Brian just said. Charlotte has very recently, I'm talking the last 5-6 years, been put on a totally different list than it ever has been of my entire life. I'm born and raised here. And when I was coming up, this was a sleepy little banker town. All of the restaurant scene was kind of middle of the fairway, steak and potatoes, corporate, expense account kind of restaurants. And now all of a sudden, and I'm not trying to be like a South End favoritist or anything like that, but the South End has given us kind of our version of a big city neighborhood. And all you have to do is stand on the light rail, which I kind of call the spine of South End, and look north and south, and you'll see density that just doesn't exist anywhere else. And density human density is the lifeblood of retail and restaurants. And so South End has kind of given us that neighborhood that has just opened up all sorts of possibilities for the retail and restaurant world. Now, that's not to say that only South End is important or expanding or relevant, et cetera, but it has just put us on a different kind of list. And it has a lot of people looking at Charlotte that wouldn't have 5 or 10 years ago.
Okay, but if you look at like the numbers of like the new retail construction in the last few years, I mean, aren't those down? I mean, you have in commercial real estate, obviously, office has been kind of challenging. The multifamily, I mean, the apartments, those are still getting built, not quite as fast as they were maybe a couple of years ago. Retail, it seems like the new stuff has slowed down a little bit. Am I wrong on that, or how would you characterize that?
I think part of it is an understanding that it's not just about quantity, but also about quality. And so Adam talked a little bit about like how Charlotte is now on this new list, which couldn't be more right. That new list means that the city is changing, but so too are expectations. And so I think if anything, what you're seeing is this kind of shift in so much as like, you can't just offer a product any longer. You have to really offer something that is more comprehensive, more experiential, or whatever it might be. And so I think if there are changes in quantity, it has more so to do with those outfits not solving the right problem for today's customers. And Adam, I don't know if you can speak more so from a numbers perspective of what you guys are seeing. And Brian, sounds like you also had some thoughts there, but I just immediately go to the expectations of today's consumer and how that's shifting these more quick, open concepts that had been around for a while, when Charlotte was more of a, viewed more so as like a lower barrier to entry from a cost perspective, no matter what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the talking about multifamily and office, kind of piggybacking off of that is, we've kind of learned through COVID that we don't need an office place to have workplace. We've started to see that, residential the cost of living has gotten to the point where it's unapproachable for some, but, at the end of the day, people love to eat, even in a downturn economy, people love to spend money eating out. And I think, the product of some of these trends were really the outcome of COVID. I think, people didn't need to come to the Uptown core or South End. I mean, I do really believe in what Adam is saying is that, South End is the place to be. So the new opportunities are, the suburbs and, the new office retail or the new retail centers around the suburbs have become, trend number one is really focusing around that. And, the Ballantyne Bowl projects and, Brookdale, for instance, those are areas of new opportunity. And so as far as really looking at this, even in a downturn, I've been doing this a long time. People have to eat, and I've always been busy, even in a recession, because the savvy restaurateurs are building during this time. They're finding the right locations. They're solidifying deals, and they're sort of capitalizing on lower construction costs. I'm gonna add 2 quick things. I totally agree with everything they said, but 2 things. We tend to have a pretty short memory. During COVID, retail apocalypse was every single clickbait headline, tagline. I mean, even if you weren't looking for it, right? It was just everywhere. We're never going to go into another store. Every single thing is going to get.
Well, you had a bunch of bankruptcies, right? You had some national bankruptcies.
You had a lot of deadwood getting burned. You had a lot of guys that were barely hanging on before that went out. So when that happens, which is the exact same thing that's happening in the office market right now, like nobody's ever going to go into an office environment again and go out and try to raise money for a new office building if you're not, one of the biggest backed equity players in the world. So when that happens, in my world, you can't just turn the spigot right back on, right? It takes a long time for these larger retail projects to develop. Like Ballantyne Bowl that Brian mentioned was a great example. I mean, they've been working on that thing since COVID, right? And they're just now delivering to restaurants 5 months ago, 6 months ago, whenever that started. So that would be the first thing is these things take a while to play out. Second thing, retail is a much different animal than multifamily, right? Like we needed multifamily. So the market goes out and finds multifamily in every direction, right? You can do it in Mount Holly. You can do it in blah, blah, blah. You can do it everywhere because it's just a function of If somebody can't live in South End because it's too expensive, or they can't live in Myers Park because it's too expensive, they can just go one ring out because it's a little less expensive. That's still too expensive. You go one ring out, or you can get a little less amenities, for example, and solves to that. Retail does not work that way. Retail in South End has to be really well done. The land is so expensive. It has to be part of a larger vertical project. And even out in the suburbs, you can't just throw up retail anywhere. It has to be extremely logical. It has to be at these crossroad events where density is kind of in a 360-degree area and can all get to it. So unfortunately, trust me, nobody would love it to be way easier to build retail than me. But it's not, you have to have the right spot and the right demographic for it to work. And it's just a lot more selective than some of these other verticals.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you got to be a little more intentional, and we'll get into some of this, and, it's got to be well designed, and it's got to have, it can't just be like nothing against Chili's, but you can't just have some like 1980s kind of Chili's and plop it in there and think, okay, this is gonna take off. I mean, it's a lot different time now, but I want to get into this zoning
also. I mean, that's a real concern. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. So I want to get into some of these trends, and I know Adam, you were talking about South End, and Brian, you were talking about the Ballantyne Bowl. I mean, one of the findings, I guess, in this report that you all did is, it asks the question, is it time to look beyond Charlotte's urban core? And certainly we've seen a lot in South End. I mean, what's happened in South End is absolutely amazing. To anybody who's been in this town for 10 years or 15 years, to look at what South End was, 15 years ago and what it is today is nothing short of incredible. And a lot of times people don't understand, like, this is one of the marquee areas in, if not the Southeast, in the country. And it's amazing. But I think you also have this trend now where you're starting to see a lot of this of these, edge cities, right? Your Ballantynes, your Matthews, the Huntersville and the Brookdale area. I mean, what are we seeing there? I mean, what is driving that?
I think the differentiator, and this is, I'm taking from Adam's playbook, because when you're doing it in the urban retail, in the urban core, you've got, 12 stories of office above, or 7 stories of multi above, and retail is sort of a little bit of a byproduct of needing something to fill in the ground floor. But, in the suburbs, these are becoming identifying placemaking through retail. You've got indoor outdoor connectivity. The bowl has the amp. So you've got program space, you've got sort of flexible outdoor space where you don't have that same ability in the urban core. So I think, the reason why it's becoming successful is people are looking for something to do and something to go and where to spend their money. And, they're not feeling like they have to come to Uptown or, to South End or even one of these, like a neighborhood like Plaza, when they can get something, that sort of experience in their own backyard.
Yeah, and I think they're also seeing, with the job and the way the work from home has gone, you have a lot more people doing at least a day or two at their houses. And so, instead of going, uptown for lunch or something, I mean, maybe are they looking to their neighborhood center, or they're staying close to home and, okay, I need to get my dry cleaning done. I got to get a haircut. All these things that you have more people closer to their homes maybe than you used to, right?
I think you do.
For sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. I think you do. And I think we need to touch on one other thing as well, which is, people grow up, right? Like everybody, when 25-year-olds that are making good money and have a bank job move to Charlotte, we have a joke. They don't ask, like, what part of Charlotte should I move to? There's like, what part of South End should I move to? But people grow up and people have families, and people think about school systems. They think about a yard, and they think about a pool. And they think about all the things that you think about when you grow up. And this rule that only cool places, like you can only have a cool place in South End, is not true. Like these guys that are from a bigger city that are moving here, because that's a giant piece of the population, in the Chicagos of the world and the New Yorks of the world and the San Franciscos of the world, where all these people are moving from. It's not just the South End and an uptown or downtown in every part of the world except for Charlotte, where cool restaurants exist, right? It is very normal for these people that can't or don't want to live in the urban core to have really cool concepts close to them. To the maturation of Charlotte, this used to be, it was uptown and everything right around uptown, and then everything else, and people were just trained to come all the way into uptown. But that's not how kind of a first tier city survives, right? I think it's extremely natural that these really cool concepts are starting to go out to where, the majority of the people are. And I think it's just a sign of a maturing city.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be this stupid debate that you'd see on like the Axios Facebook page or on Instagram or something, like, have we hit peak brewery? Are we at peak brewery? I mean, this was like a discussion. It's like, and I think what the answer wound up being was in like Noda and South End, like maybe the answer was yes, but where the answer was no was out into these suburban areas. Then, so you see Suffolk Punch opening up at SouthPark. You see Sycamore going to open in Cotswold. You see Old Mecklenburg Brewery opening in Ballantyne. And these are areas that really there weren't breweries there before, but they're moving out into these areas because that's what the people want. And that's where people live, right?
Totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think both Adam and Brian bring up great points. I mean, what's interesting, though, in particular about like some of those concepts that you're talking about there, Tony, and I'd say even others like Harriet's, even Fly Kid Fly is an extension of some well-known concepts up here, is like, yes, we mature, but a lot of times we still have that, the same expectations from an experience standpoint. And I think why you see a lot of those brands moving into those areas is because they've proven successful. They've cracked the code on how you tell a good story, how you get someone bought into something. And then with that outward growth, with that maturity, with density opening up in places like Birkdale or, in the Ballantyne, the Bowl of Ballantyne, you're able to then transplant that brand into an area where people are moving to. And the equation just kind of rolls, just call it 20 miles south of where they were experiencing it previously in the Noda area or the South End area.
So what's the best advice for a business? Like if a business is looking at starting up, I mean, certainly South End, at least before they check the lease rates, has got to be attractive, right? You're like, wow, okay, we could do in South End. The demographic numbers there must just be amazing. But that might not always be the best place to go necessarily, right? I mean, I guess my question is, what's the best advice for businesses when they're trying to scout locations?
It's product market fit, right? Like, I mean, I think that, South End is a great market, but if you're going after, I'll give you a quick example. We live kind of in between Cotswold and SouthPark. And when I tell my wife, like, hey, there's this new restaurant that just opened up in South End, let's go check it out tonight, I immediately get like because it's not that once we get there, it's fun and we enjoy it, but she's like, am I ready for South End tonight? Right. So I think you got to ask yourself, what is your product market fit? Who is your avatar that you're going after? Right. South End is young. Its median age is probably 10 to 15 years younger than SouthPark. Certainly at least that for Ballantyne and Huntersville.
Yeah, I think your report says South End, median age 29, SouthPark 40, Matthews 40, Ballantyne 38.
Yeah.
Plaza Midwood 34.
It's a big, big difference. So I think that if you were selling, something that is more to an ultra fluid, older demographic, and you go to South End, you're really betting that those guys are going to come to you. Like, for instance, Design with Them Reach. They were in SouthPark. We moved them to South End, and it was a big bet that we took. Like, hey, all of our customers live in SouthPark. Are they going to be willing to go to South End to buy a very expensive piece of furniture? And luckily that they were able, but I certainly think you are going to not do yourself a lot of good service if you think South End is the only place that you can open X store, depending on what demographics are kind of your main customer.
All right. I want to jump into this next trend that you all identified, this sort of the big versus small, the micro retail, versus sort of the bigger experiential concept. I mean, what are you seeing there? What are some of the features? What are some examples of things that retailers you think are doing pretty well to draw the people in?
Brian, want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of this is kind of a product of this idea of like fine casuals and chef driven concepts where they're paring down the menus so they don't need as much front and back of house. And so it's, with rent rates increasing, they're trying to find more efficient and smaller venues and kind of getting into the world of that fast casual. So, even areas where utilizing outdoor patio space and you don't need a lot of footprint of the interior. And so then I think the flip side of that is these larger kind of experiential, retail spaces that are connected to an activity like, pickleball or golf or, putt-putt or something like that. So I think you've really got kind of the two bookends of the experience. You got the quick and convenience with a high offering, and then you've got sort of, experience then tied with food. And to the point made earlier, that's where I think the medium-sized restaurants, the traditional kind of Applebee's and Chili's and stuff like that just don't have anything to offer other than food, and they're probably too large, are starting to kind of go away.
Yeah. And Brian, I mean, we talk about this often, right? And like the idea of a very specific point of view. I think a huge part of that comes down to the fact that today, more than ever before, which I really think kind of accentuates that bifurcation that we're seeing in the market, is that you're not just designing for a use case, whether it's the solution or the brand or the interiors and the architecture. You're designing for a feeling, for a mindset, a very specific persona, like Adam had said earlier. And so I think the other piece that ties in here too is like the competition, because Charlotte is graduating into this different tier of a city. There's just different expectations for consumers. And when there's so much to choose from, the last thing that you can be is everything for everyone. You have to really have, and going back to where I started, a specific point of view on who you are, what you represent. I just think of a great example because it's literally the talk of every conversation right now, which is La Lima. Like everyone is talking about the sandwich shop here in South End, and they have desserts, they have other items on their menu, but like they have really they're being known for Peruvian style sandwiches. And that's what they lean into. That's their whole identity.
But how do you build a brand around, like, I mean, is it just the good food, or do they have other, I mean, is the branding really sharp? Do they have design features inside? I haven't been there. How do you tell that story?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I guess I would say if you just have a product, you're probably already behind the eight ball, especially in South End, where those expectations are, quite a bit different when you're talking primarily to Gen Z. Brian, I'd love your take from an interior standpoint. I've been a few times. I think that they do a great job, and they have. I mean, this is the group behind, and hopefully I'm not misspeaking, but Viva and what's their other concept? I'm sorry, South End. Unta, thank you.
Yeah.
And so they've become known for truly, let's call it experiential concepts, where there is a brand that is told throughout. And I think when you walk into La Lima in particular, not only is your experience with the product really good, which is of course extremely important, but you feel like you are somewhere when you walk in as well. And I don't know, Brian, Adam, if you guys have been in there, if you can share your experience or not, but certainly having been in there 3 times myself, you feel like you're being transported somewhere, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I think with more and more concepts, just in general, it doesn't really matter what the concept is. If you want to stand out, I think the more that happens, the more the competition creates. And so where you win, and this is, I mean, the 3 of us work on, a lot of projects together, and we've kind of created the formula. First of all, you got to find the right location. You're not going to win if you don't have the right location and a good deal structure. But outside of that, it's really building the digital storefront, having that, experience on social, understanding clear identity of what your brand is, and creating that experience before you even step in the door. And then, what gets me excited is design really matters. You have to stand out amongst, head and shoulders amongst everybody else. And so, I think, when you kind of hit all those marks, you're going to execute on food, you're going to execute on service. That's what the operator's there for. If you find the right location and you stand out on your digital and your physical, you're going to win all day long.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Coca-Cola Consolidated, Charlotte's local bottler and the largest Coca-Cola bottler in the U.S. Coke Consolidated recently invested $15 million into its Monroe facility, which included a new technical training academy, the first of its kind within the Coca-Cola system. Learn more at www.cokeconsolidated.com/media. Does everything have to have a cool factor nowadays? Because, I mean, there's still, it seems like a lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants that are still doing all right, that are kind of old school. Like we just moved about 6 months ago, live in South Charlotte. We're about 10 minutes from Pineville. And I was talking to a buddy, and he's like, you got to check out this wings place called D.D. Pecker's. And you go there, and it's in this like kind of rundown strip center where there are potholes in the parking lot, but you go in and they got, it's kind of a sports bar. You got TV screens. The wings are really good. I don't know. It doesn't have an Instagram wall. It doesn't have like sophisticated branding. Seems like it's doing okay. I mean, does everything need to have that kind of cool factor?
I think that cool means a lot of different things, right? I mean, authenticity is as cool as it gets. You know what I mean? And it's like Moosehead. Like Moosehead doesn't have a big IG following, but like D.D. Peckers, they've been making some of the best wings in town for 25 years. And people just have a tremendous amount of respect for guys that kind of pack up the lunch pail and go to work every day and kind of know what they are and execute. So I think authenticity and execution can be just as important as a really cool, social media Instagram following. I was going to say you can't fake authenticity. I mean, it's so true. I mean, so a lot of these brands that are launching today, they don't have 12 or 15 years of history behind it, and so it's really and the cool factor is just, do you want to focus to stand out amongst the crowd? Really, it's not design for design's sake or just branding for branding's sake or whatever. It's pretty easily sought after. It's fake, but when you're casual, comfortable, high level offering, fun, those are the things that the people are looking for. And again, it comes down to what's your audience like. If your audience is, wants to, hang out with Thirsty Beaver or the $2 Saloon, you've got a different kind of message than a cocktail bar and somewhere else in town. So,
I mean, Brian hit it home, Adam hit it home. There's something that kind of stuck out to me. I think it's, the idea of cool, I don't think it's the right term. I think it's like you're trying to solve a problem for someone. And in today's day and age, when there's so much, everyone is vying for attention and there's so much noise out there, you have to figure out a way to be memorable. You have to figure out a way for someone to say, I didn't just want to go there one time or two times. I want that to be a ritual every single week. And in order to do that, you have to understand your consumer. You have to understand how they make decisions. If wings is their go-to meal every single week, then what is that person's behaviors and how do I tell a story that makes them feel a type of way? That might mean it's cool. That might be what that results in, as some would define cool, but it might also mean that it's just a tavern and my audience that's exactly what they look for. And I think, we probably all wear certain brands. I think of the sports world. Well, there's some people that wear Nike. There's some people that wear Adidas. There's some people now that just wear Hoka or Brooks. And there are reasons that they choose those brands because it makes them feel a type of way, or it's, I'm going to quickly, put Nike into the cool club, but Hoka or Brooks into the more, I am just a natural born runner. I don't care about looks. I care about function. And so taking that same type of ideology, applying it to the retail hospitality space is the same thing that we're solving for here.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I mean, one of the other things you hear about Charlotte sometimes is that, that people kind of, something new opens up and a lot of people go there, and then something even newer opens up and everybody migrates there. And then you're sort of, some of the original ones that seem like they were pretty good, struggle because everyone's kind of moving on to the next new thing. I mean, do you all see, is that a thing? Does that happen? I mean, if you're a retailer, how do you guard against that? I mean, what are you seeing?
I think it happens all the time. I think that you have to position, for restaurants specifically or bars, you have to position yourself as both a local and a destination. So, the people coming in to experience it from one time, because it's a new thing, they'll check it out. They maybe tell their friends about it. They'll check it out. But to kind of hit, a velocity, you have to be both kind of neighborhood and local at the same time. It's really hard to not create a following because I think people, are, they have a short attention span, as Daniel pointed out, and they're always on to what the next thing is. And, we just don't, we're not a city like New York or San Francisco that's, has bookings to 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And, you're taking 18 months to try to get into the space. It's usually, that the flip side of that is actually not a negative thing. Where a new space opens up, you pretty much can get into it. You don't have to wait 6 months for reservation. So, we really should take that not for granted and go back and support, spaces, because a lot of things that happen too. If somebody checks it out for the first time, maybe service wasn't dialed in, maybe the food wasn't dialed in, and then they don't go back. So, there's a lot to that mix, but I think the operators that are more dialed in and more tuned in know that, and they know how to kind of challenge that. But some of them have to pivot, and some of them have to kind of recreate what they thought they're going to be or what they're going to focus on. And that always is morphing and changing to the audience and what the needs are.
Yeah. Is that something that's particular to Charlotte, or how do you all see Charlotte differing from other cities? I mean, is that something that goes on all over the place? Or, I mean,
referred to as the honeymoon period. Every single one of my national clients talks about the honeymoon period. Yeah. The good ones just figure out how to keep adding value and keep people coming back through execution. Just because, we always talk about legs of the stool, right? Like somebody can have a cool, flashy website or design, but if the service and the food and the value proposition aren't there, then they're going to have a drastic honeymoon period. So it's not novel to Charlotte. The good restaurateurs know how to deal with it.
What are some examples of retail or restaurants that you think are doing a pretty good job at being able to sustain what they've been doing?
Loaded question. I mean, Jim Noble, John Dressler, they've been doing it a long time. The kind of local guys. Trey Wilson. Yeah, Trey's been doing a ton of good stuff.
How do they do it? Like, what's the secret sauce?
They're consistent execution, and they're always trying to elevate and, connection to local farmers and agriculture, supporting those that are around us. We have great agriculture in North Carolina, and ultimately also traveling and seeing how the rest of the world is doing it, and always, continue to learn. I think the hardest things for chef and operators right now in general, just where we are today, and I think it'll change, is it's really not as much about what they're producing, the product they're putting out, or the service. It's really about how adventurous the Charlotte guests are. Adam, you talked about it, Charlotte kind of traditionally being a, expense account, meat and potatoes city. It's finding, guests that are allowing the chefs to educate them, taking them on different paths and trying something new, because otherwise everything is kind of consistent and the same. So, it's not to say that, the chefs we just mentioned are doing something completely avant-garde. They're just doing it consistently good over and over again.
I wanted to ask a little bit. There's a section in the report about what's referred to as entertainment, and it says the lines between dining, entertainment, fitness, and socializing are blurring, giving rise to venues that aim to be more than just a place to eat or drink. And I know we've touched on that a little bit. There's an example in the report of Raleigh in the Loso area, pickleball, and they've got cocktails and they've got food. I mean, are we going to see a lot more places like that? Are we seeing more?
Yeah, it's been a hot segment for me doing what I do, doing commercial real estate. And it's interesting how many different examples there are. Obviously pickleball, and then paddle, I think it's the next thing you're going to see, which I've never actually even played, but it's in Europe, it's even more popular than pickleball. And you've got everything from, ping pong to darts to, you name it. Other larger markets have a lot of different things.
Where do we stand on the axe throwing? Where are we on that trend?
I think we might be on the downward trajectory of the axe throwing, but I think that what we talked about earlier about just how many restaurants there are, especially younger people that maybe are going out multiple times a week. They like to mix in some other things. And obviously with breweries having a lot of extra space, there's always the cornhole boards, and there's always the, extra large Jenga and all the other things that just give people something else to do that keeps you in the space. This is not really new. It's just there's just more options. Like bowling's been around for forever in the US. And that was kind of entertainment. Now the food wasn't fancy. It was onion rings but heavy, but that's been around for a long time, and people are just getting a lot more creative with it now. Yeah, I think these spaces are naturally programmed throughout the day. People are having office meetings or meetings over coffee and where people are playing pickleball and it's programmed throughout the day. And I think the big differentiator in what I'm passionate about is just a higher level of food and beverage, food and drink. It's kind of gamifying something that already exists, that's nostalgic, and then it also is opens to a wider audience. It could be something where you go play with a bunch of friends, or you bring your family on the weekend, so you can have multiple different experiences at the same location throughout the week. And I think that's just good management of programming through the week and getting bodies in the door.
Yeah. All right. I want to touch a little bit on this last trend that you all identified in there, this idea of tenancy versus partnerships, that it's not really just enough to say, hey, we have this space for lease, but that the developers and the retail operators are now seeing advantages in working together in different ways and in partnering in different ways. Can someone explain this a little bit?
Adam, you want to take a stab? I got some thoughts I want to add.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat. So I think this is especially important when you're a developer that has retail as a piece of a much larger project, because what you want to do is create a sense of place in a large project, and retail does that better than any other thing that you could possibly do. I've seen so many developers go and create this giant cavernous lobby and spend $1 bazillion on fine Italian marble, but there's no there. If you come in and get a really passionate, excellent operator to come in, whether it's something that can kind of, we call it ringing the cash registers all day. And it just means that there's staying in collision opportunities happening all day. So I think that really smart developers understand that. And instead of just letting, whatever retailer wants to be there, come to you, it's like, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to program this X number of square feet that's at the front door of our larger complex. And we're going to go get the best in class coffee, the best in class lunch operator, the best in class happy hour guy. And we're going to give them deals that are more partnership deals than just your standard, I'm landlord, you're tenant, it's first of the month, pay me, kind of Goodfellas style, right? It's a different outlook. It's like, hey, what can we do to make you guys successful? Because selfishly, it's going to give me a much better project in the end.
I've seen kind of two things. One, I would say, like at a high level, to complement what Adam had just said, I think in a lot of ways, your brand, your identity, your business plan, your positioning, your story, in a lot of ways kind of is the new rent. And it gets you to the negotiation table to have more leverage. And from our perspective, because we do a good bit of work in the commercial space, also to complement what Adam just said, more today than ever before do we have developers that actually really understand this and the role that they play in place branding, and are investing more and more in trying to play a part of the equation. How do we also complement retail? Because retail really is the bread and butter of why people go places. And so they're asking the question, well, how can we also complement, to extend, to create a place? One simple example that comes to mind, because she's terrific at what she does, Jordan Dollard with Esther and Elsa, really helped to build Front Porch Sundays over at Atherton. And that was an activation that for a while has just driven tremendous foot traffic to that area in South End. And that is one way of creating a identity for a place, driving foot traffic to a place. And that's an investment that developer needs to make. And that is just kind of continuing. So I thought I'd throw those two pieces out there because it just, from our perspective, we see that investment just from the developer side continuing to be more significant than really ever before.
All right, we've just got a couple of minutes left. I'd like to go kind of lightning round style, if we could. I'm going to put you a little on the spot. And this report, the Charlotte Hospitality and Retail Guide 2025, came out a few months ago. Came out in early 2025. So, I don't want to say it's dated, but, are there newer trends that are emerging? I want to ask you each to give me one trend that you think we will see either toward the end of this year into 2026, 2027, as it relates to retail and hospitality. Who wants to start?
I'll kick it off. I think we're seeing a trend with the younger generation not drinking as much. So I think there's a little bit of slowdown in breweries and bars. So I think the coffee culture and alternative around drinking, maybe earlier venues, is becoming more and more prudent. I mean, it's been moving in that direction for a very long time, but I think it's catching a lot of steam, a lot of health focused, kind of trend around, healthy eating, fresh eating. So I think it's been a long trend, but the coffee culture, the early morning culture is just, I think you're seeing more and more of that.
Okay. Did he take yours, Daniel or Adam?
No, I'll give you some more time, Adam. Hopefully I don't steal yours. I think to me, it's more so like trends. What do I see as kind of being focuses of inspiration? I think more than ever before, people are feeling, I don't say this to undermine what we do because it's just very relevant, but I do think there's a time and place, a space today more than ever before where people want to feel disconnected. And I think that means that conversation, that human to human touch is becoming more relevant. So I think that's a theme that you'll continue to see. How it's executed is up to the operator and their vision. The other thing that I would say is I think there's another theme of speaking to the younger generations, like Brian said, how do you take what has otherwise been traditional and make it non-traditional? And I think one example that you see, and I'm not going to give others, but one example that you see is DJs popping up at coffee shops. That is not traditional, but both of those two things in their own right are also traditional, but in different settings. And so when you combine them, it's not traditional, but they are unique in their own way and they have a place individually. And I think you're going to see more and more of that kind of juxtaposition of two things coming together that may not make a whole lot of sense, but because they don't make a whole lot of sense, should make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would add, I think you're going to have more specialization, more differentiation. I think the South American or Peruvian sandwiches is a great example of people like really leaning into something that they do really well, which I think will continue to drive more of a market for smaller spaces. And I have something that I really want to say, but I want to do it myself. So I'm not going to give you one.
I have to wait. We were talking before we started recording you want me to give a plug for the Retail Redeveloped podcast soon to launch?
It's coming back. I'm getting a lot of pressure on this. It's coming back, I promise.
You don't want to give us the preview?
But it's going to start as solo content and grow back into guests, but it's going to be more of a cadence. The cadence will be more solo and guests once a month as opposed to the old once a week that about killed me.
Got it. Okay. Well, that seems like a good place to end it. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Right. That's a wrap. This episode of the Charlotte Ledger Podcast is produced by Lindsey Banks. This podcast episode is brought to you by Coca-Cola Consolidated, Charlotte's local bottler and the largest Coca-Cola bottler in the U.S. Coke Consolidated recently invested $15 million into its Monroe facility, which included a new technical training academy, the first of its kind within the Coca-Cola system. Learn more at www.cokeconsolidated.com/media.
QueenCityPodcastNetwork.com.